The desert wind carried whispers of sand across cracked asphalt as three men in leather jackets surrounded a Latina woman outside the flickering neon of an abandoned gas station. "Another lost sheep wandering where she don't belong," one sneered, blocking her path to the motorcycle parked under the broken streetlight. They hadn't noticed Sofia Reyes emerge from the shadows of the auto repair shop, two Belgian Malinois padding silently at her side. They didn't see her hand brush against the tactical vest beneath her mechanic's coveralls, or catch the subtle gesture that made both dogs freeze in perfect attention. "Time to move along, lady," the leader said with mock politeness. Sofia said nothing. She simply watched. They had no idea the woman they were harassing was a former Army EOD specialist who had defused bombs in 3 war zones. The Nevada desert town of Copper Falls had been Sofia's refuge for 8 months now, ever since she'd bought the small garage on the outskirts where Highway 95 bent toward nowhere. The place suited her, isolated, forgotten, existing in the spaces between official maps. She'd chosen it precisely because it was the kind of town where people minded their own business and strangers passed through without stopping. But lately, the silence felt different. Weighted. Wrong. Her walks with Phoenix and Ghost through the industrial district had become exercises in surveillance rather than relaxation. Broken windows reflected watching eyes. Spray-painted symbols appeared overnight on walls, crude but deliberate markings that spoke of territory and hate. The dogs sensed it too, their ears constantly scanning, muscles coiled beneath their dark fur. Tonight, under the harsh fluorescent lights of the gas station, that tension crystallized into something solid and dangerous. The men pressed closer, their voices dropping to threatening whispers about keeping the neighborhood clean and teaching lessons to outsiders. The woman, Maria, Sofia had heard her called at the diner, backed against her bike, hands shaking as she fumbled for her keys. Sofia measured distances automatically. 12 feet to the nearest attacker. Clear sight lines. No civilians in the immediate area. 2 seconds to close the gap. Her fingers found the release on Phoenix's leash, but before she could act, Maria found her voice. "I'm just trying to get home," she said firmly, chin raised despite the fear in her eyes. "Home?" The leader laughed harshly. "This ain't your home, sweetie. Never will be." That's when he made his mistake. His hand shot out to grab Maria's arm. Sofia moved like liquid steel. Her shoulder caught the leader in the midsection, driving him back into the gas pump with a metallic clang. Before his companions could react, Phoenix and Ghost flanked them with military precision, low growls rumbling from their chests as they herded the men into a tight circle. "Back off," Sofia commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to life-or-death situations. Now. But these men had been emboldened by months of intimidating people without consequence. Instead of retreating, they regrouped. The leader pulled a tire iron from his jacket. Another reached for something in his boot, the glint of steel catching the neon light. Sofia's training kicked in with mechanical precision. She disarmed the first attacker with a swift strike to his wrist, sending the tire iron skittering across the asphalt. The second man lunged with his blade, but she pivoted away from the arc of his swing and drove her elbow into his solar plexus. He dropped, gasping. The third attacker tried to flank her, but Ghost intercepted him with 60 pounds of trained muscle, pinning him against a concrete pillar without breaking skin. A perfect demonstration of controlled force. By the time Sheriff's Deputy Jake Morrison arrived with flashing lights and drawn weapon, the fight was over. Sofia stood calmly beside the subdued men, her dogs returned to heel position, while Maria provided a shaking but clear account of what had transpired. But Deputy Morrison's response chilled Sofia's blood. Instead of arresting the attackers, he focused his suspicion on her. "Mighty convenient," he said, eyes narrow with prejudice, "how you just happened to be here when trouble started." The men immediately began spinning their version of events, claiming Sofia had attacked them unprovoked, that she'd been harassing locals for weeks, that her attack dogs were dangerous and uncontrolled. Morrison nodded along, his bias evident in every gesture. "I'm placing you under arrest for assault with a deadly weapon," he told Sofia, ignoring Maria's protests. Those dogs of yours constitute weapons in the eyes of the law." As the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, Sofia caught Morrison's satisfied smirk in the reflection of his patrol car window. This wasn't random prejudice, it was orchestrated. The holding cell in Copper Falls was a concrete box that reeked of disinfectant and desperation. Sofia sat on the narrow bench, analyzing the systematic corruption she'd glimpsed. Morrison's quick dismissal of evidence, his immediate sympathy for the attackers, his knowledge of legal technicalities that would keep her locked up, it all pointed to something larger than small-town bigotry. Meanwhile, across town, Detective Elena Vasquez was conducting her own investigation. Unlike Morrison, she'd built her career on facts rather than assumptions. The gas station's security camera had captured everything, and what she saw contradicted the official report entirely. More disturbing were the patterns she discovered when cross-referencing recent incidents. 3 families of color had left town abruptly in the past 6 months. A Mexican restaurant had burned down under suspicious circumstances. Missing person reports had been filed and then mysteriously withdrawn. All under Morrison's watch, the threads led back to a name that appeared in old case files but never in arrest records: Tommy Brennan, son of the town's former mayor, now running a scrapyard on the edge of the desert. A man with connections, resources, and a history of violence that had been systematically covered up. Sofia's release came 18 hours later, facilitated by Elena's quiet intervention and a bail fund that appeared from nowhere. But as she stepped into the harsh desert sunlight, Sofia knew the real battle was just beginning. That night, she loaded Phoenix and Ghost into her modified pickup truck and drove toward the scrapyard. The facility sprawled across 20 acres of sand and rust, protected by chain-link fencing topped with razor wire. But Sofia had spent years penetrating much more sophisticated defenses. She approached from the wash that ran behind the property, using the terrain to mask her movement. The dogs moved beside her like shadows, their dark forms invisible against the desert night. Years of explosive ordnance disposal had taught her patience, how to advance inch by inch, testing every step, reading the environment for threats. The scrapyard's office glowed with the light of multiple computer screens. Through night vision binoculars, Sofia could see 3 men inside, their conversation animated by alcohol and false bravado. She recognized 2 of them from the gas station confrontation. Moving with surgical precision, she cut the power to the outer fence and slipped through a gap in the chain link. Phoenix and Ghost flanked her automatically, their training from military deployments still sharp despite their civilian retirement. Together, they navigated through corridors of stacked cars and machinery, Ghosts in a graveyard of metal. The office building was accessible through a loading dock that had been left unsecured, the kind of overconfidence that came from years of operating without consequences. Sofia disabled the internal security system with tools from her EOD kit, then made her way to the second floor where the real business was conducted. What she found exceeded her expectations. File cabinets filled with surveillance photos of minority residents, detailed plans for enforcement actions, and correspondence with similar groups across 3 states. But the most damning evidence was digital emails, bank transfers, and video recordings that laid bare a network of organized intimidation stretching back 5 years. Sofia downloaded everything onto encrypted drives, but she also planted something in return. Hidden throughout the facility, she placed small devices designed to broadcast the collected evidence to every media outlet and law enforcement agency in Nevada. The timer was set for 72 hours, enough time for her to disappear if things went wrong, but not enough for the evidence to be destroyed. Her exit was interrupted by voices in the yard below. Brennan had arrived with reinforcements, their flashlight beams sweeping through the shadows where Sofia had been just minutes before. But she was already moving, leading Phoenix and Ghost through a maze of gutted vehicles toward the perimeter fence. The confrontation came at the main gate, where Brennan's men had positioned themselves to cut off any escape route. But Sofia had learned long ago that the best defense was often a calculated offense. The smoke grenades she'd planted earlier activated on schedule, filling the yard with dense gray clouds that turned flashlights useless and sent the men stumbling blind through their own territory. In the chaos, Sofia struck with military precision, The first man went down to a joint lock that left him conscious but immobilized. The second found himself face to face with Phoenix, who demonstrated the difference between a pet and a weapon with perfectly controlled aggression. Ghost took the third, using his weight and training to pin the man without permanent harm. Brennan himself proved more dangerous than his followers. He emerged from the smoke with a pistol drawn and murder in his eyes, the look of a man who had killed before and felt no remorse about doing it again. "You picked the wrong town to play hero," he snarled. The gun trained on Sofia's center mass, but Sofia had defused bombs while under sniper fire. A single armed man in an open yard was almost routine. She dropped and rolled as he fired, the muzzle flash illuminating the smoke around them. Phoenix launched himself from the left while Ghost circled right, and Brennan found himself trapped between two highly trained predators. The gun skittered away across the gravel. Brennan went down hard, his threats dissolving into desperate pleas as he realized he was no longer the apex predator in his own territory. When the FBI arrived 3 hours later, summoned by Elena's carefully compiled evidence and Sofia's anonymous tips, they found Brennan and his men secured with military-grade restraints, surrounded by boxes of evidence that would take prosecutors months to fully catalog. The media storm that followed brought national attention to Copper Falls. The corruption network crumbled as members scrambled to cut deals and save themselves. Morrison was arrested, his badge stripped, his career in ruins. The systematic harassment of minority residents was exposed in congressional hearings that sparked federal legislation, but Sofia didn't stay to watch the aftermath. By the time reporters arrived at her garage, they found it empty except for a note on the workbench. "Some battles are won by those who fight them. Others by those who walk away when the fighting's done." She resettled in Oregon, in a mountain town where her skills as a mechanic were valued more than her ethnicity. The garage she opened there specialized in restoring classic cars, but it also served another purpose. Veterans struggling with PTSD found their way to her shop, drawn by word of mouth and the healing presence of Phoenix and Ghost. Within 2 years, the Desert Dogs program had expanded across 4 states. Combat veterans were paired with retired military working dogs, creating bonds that helped both species transition from war to peace. The program's success was measured not in statistics but in the quiet victories, nightmares that stopped, anxiety that eased, purpose that returned. Sofia never spoke publicly about Copper Falls, but the lesson of that desert confrontation lived on in every veteran who found healing through four-legged partnership. Sometimes justice required a badge and a courtroom. Sometimes it needed only courage, loyalty, and the willingness to stand up when others could not. In the end, the most powerful weapon against hate wasn't force, it was the simple refusal to let it define the terms of engagement. Sofia had learned that lesson in the desert, and now she taught it to others, one rescued warrior at a time.